Welcome to the Sunday Morning Relevant podcast featuring the most relevant sequence of bets on any card in the country. And once again, we're going to stick with Saratoga here because it's summertime. And joined by my co-host here, Michael Serio, longtime handicapper, worked at tracks, knows a lot of the ins and outs. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Yesterday was kind of a mixed bag. I didn't make money, that's for sure. I was wise to go against Decorated Invader, and so that was good, but I was unwise to go against the Skydiver. So kind of one favorite was dominant, and one favorite, in my opinion, unsurprisingly, didn't win the race. So what was your take on yesterday, Mike?
Well, I think that Swiss Skydive, that horse, that's the character department, I didn't get them out on the quarter, and boy did she. I'm very interested in what they're going to do with her. Whether they go a derby route, whether they go against Yamin, in either route is tough.
Sure.
So I don't know where they're going to go, but it's rather interesting. Obviously, the more impressive of the win. Decorated Invader, didn't even hit the board, which is I thought to be amazing, given his record. It was just really unblemished outside of the previous stuff. And that was a length and a quarter loss.
Sure.
I was kind of shocked by that. Her horse needs to perform better.
With that respect, you and I are in disagreement because I thought with the Saratoga Derby, we're calling it the second running of it, I think if they ran that race 5 times, you'd probably have 5 different winners. So it wasn't surprising to me that Decorated Invader didn't win. I wouldn't be surprised if he had won, but I didn't think his numbers, his speed figures, were that much better or even better than the other horses in the race. So I wasn't surprised that he lost, and the horse that beat him had only lost to him by a length and a half the previous race. So no, I wasn't surprised. With respect to Swiss Skydiver, I think discretion is often the greater part of valor. I think to that end, I think they'd be better off in the Kentucky Oaks. I think particularly, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but the fact that the mean ran in a 7-furlong race last time out in the test, I think that indicates that she may have some distance limitations. I harken back to that race at Churchill where looked like she was going to be an easy winner, and then some horse pulled right up to her. To her credit, she dug back in and somehow put that horse away. I think that was her most impressive performance. Do you remember that race?
Actually, I don't. I do not remember the race.
Yeah, it was earlier in spring. It was the same day. It was actually the day the Kentucky Derby was supposed to be, and it was the day that Nadal won, and it was the day that Charlatan won. Unfortunately, both horses are on the shelf. I could be wrong. It may have been at Oaklawn, actually, now that I'm rethinking it. But in any event, in that race, she was going a little bit further, and she had to kind of re-dig in. And I'm wondering if she might have some distance limitations. So I think that makes sense. And, to that end, it makes sense to Swiss Skydiver to make the next run in the Kentucky Oaks. But that's just my opinion.
Look, I would say that the greatest thing that we learned from the race yesterday was, does Swiss Skydiver have to have the lead? Because I think to beat Yanni, you can't just go head-to-head with that horse for a half mile, 3/4. You go 109, you guys are going to be dead. So I did because that was my biggest question, is because there was a decent amount of speed in there, can she just kind of sit off and win? And her 2 best races coming into this, she was on the front end both times. So I do like how she won and how she ran. So I agree.
Yeah, it's tough to not like how she won yesterday, because boy, that looked awfully easy, and I felt awfully foolish for betting against that horse. And not to make excuses, but I did listen to another podcast where they intimated that she was going to be cooked in a speed duel, so that kind of clouded my judgment. So again, it's on me. I'm the one who makes the bets. So all right. Anyway, let's move on to the late pick 5, Saratoga Sunday. This is the only podcast that I can find that focuses on Sunday racing, which I often find to be some of the best racing. Today, let's face it, today we've got a $500,000 race featured in this pick 5, the Saratoga Oaks, which is the counterpart to the Saratoga Derby, which we were just talking about. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Let's move over to the first race, which is race 6 at Saratoga. It's a maiden $30,000 race, which is a relatively inexpensive horse to run at Saratoga. So these are not the classiest horses at the track for sure, but still makes for some interesting handicapping. Mike, what do you got here?
Well, to your point, I have two horses, depending on how you want to play your ticket. And my first horse was a $3,200 January Seaman horse. So he is not the classiest horse of the bunch, but he does run pretty well in the last few races, and that's the two lost and grown. Like I said, his pedigree isn't great, but his last two races, he was just there at this level. He just stepped up the last time. He's been 20, and ran well. I think he can improve into jockey to be going. And I think
underrated rider.
Him on your ticket. Absolutely. I think if you have him on your ticket, he's there. He's going to be there at the wire at some point. As well before, Bill Mott, you can't throw him out. And this horse is obviously a little bit more classy. And his last one out, he dropped in from maybe pressure to maybe 40. Really improved by almost 20 buyer point figures. Which shows that, he really responded quite well. Got the length and a half, two lost in Rome. I think, from a buyer speed figure, those two are the most, likely horses to win the race and to be there at the end. And I like others more in other races. So I'm going to go 2-4, but I will not, discount anybody who wants to take a shot with the 6 and 7 who were a little bit more of a question mark.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up. I think you're obviously spot on with the 2 and 4. Listen, they're buyers fit. They look to be informed. They're there. If they run their race, they're going to be there right at the end. So that they're obviously, if you're planning to pick 5, you got to trust your ticket in some way. I think that you use these horses. However, there are some serious question marks on some of these other horses that I find interesting. I'll start off with the 6. The 6 is a $350,000 Team September sale horse. Last year was trained by Chad Brown. It ran one race, it washed off the turf. It, ran well, second place. Only out of 5 horses, granted, but something happened there because the horse disappears until now. Shows up in a different barn. It shows up in Jorge Abreu's barn. But it's still you wonder if this horse is destined for the turf. But it still attracts Jose Ortiz, and it's son of Carpe Diem. It's certainly an interesting situation. I don't think you or I would be at all surprised if that horse won. And then along the same lines, you've got another Carpe Diem in this race. That's the 5 horse. And, similar situation. It used to be trained by a premier trainer, and Bob Baffert shows up in Rudolph Brissett's barn. Doesn't show much last time out, but yet gets a relatively low morning line, probably because of the horse's breeding. So those are 2 interesting horses. And then you got Jose Lezcano's riding the 7. It's another interesting horse. He's going to flash some speed in this race. I don't think it would surprise any handicapper if the horse went to the front and never looked back. So I am not crazy about the way the sequence starts off because there are just so many questions in this first leg. The horses you like 2 and the 4, you could make a case that they're kind of flotters and that someone more talented can easily deal with them. So some of these horses that have the question marks are certainly scary. So it's a tough race to start the sequence off, and I'm not crazy about the race. Do you agree? Or?
I don't disagree. It wouldn't be shocking if 2 or 4 won, but given the running style, they could get into trouble. And I would even, I agree with the question mark, but really, if I had to throw a third one in here of the question mark, it would be the 7 Striking Speed, who showed speed at a higher, a better rate. Last out is dropping, and he's shortening up.
Sure.
And so, that is often dangerous when they drop and shorten up.
Right.
So,
especially if they get near the front.
He would be the biggest barrier. And if he has enough talent to hit the front, the question is, can he hold them all off? And,
And he tracks Jose Lezcano, who I think is a very underrated rider. So.
Absolutely. Especially on the turf.
Absolutely. So, yep. So, all right, let's turn the page here and move on to race 7, which is a mile on the turf. It's an allowance race. Horses that have never won more than one race. outside of maybe a claiming race. So I think it's an interesting race for sure. I think, again, you could make a case for a few of these horses. There's obviously going to be a big favorite here, which is going to be the sixth. The sixth comes out of a race against Colonel Liam, and he ran in the Saratoga Derby yesterday, and he was bet down. And, this horse bobbled, this sixth horse bobbled in that race. So you could argue that might have cost the horse that race. Trained by Chad Brown, ridden by Rosario. So what's your take? Is this horse unbeatable, or are you going to take a stab against her? I know you don't like to single, so where are you here?
So, yes, I think that this horse is most likely going to, but, like I said, it's a difficult sport, and it takes, one thing to go wrong and 100 things right to win. So, I am going to go with two horses in here. Obviously, the sixth will have the Chad Brown for all the reasons you mentioned. Colonel Liam ran well last, and he's cutting back in distance, second off the layoff. He's going to come with a huge run and most likely winner. The other horse that I'm going to include is the 9 Duress for Thomas Abatrani, who I don't love as a trainer. He's hurt me so many times, and every time I have established joy, I end up losing by half. But the horse is, from a buyer speed figure, is within range, 85, 86. So his talent and his races are within that range. He's going to be second off the layoff. Off the layoff, he ran at 86, just that beat. In this condition at Belmont. And so I think he should be on pace with him, coming around, turning for home. Hopefully he has something that can get him into the 90s. And his last race, he did stumble at the break. He was, wide. So he has an excuse too for not winning that one as well. So I just think at 5-1 with Luis Diaz on there, there's a few things to like about him, and reason to believe he can move forward and really jump up and challenge him. I don't know if he wins, but I do think he's going to be there with him.
And I'm with you on that. That would be my second choice as well. I like, for the reasons you mentioned, but also, and this is frustrating about Saratoga, in this race, there seems to be quite a bit of speed. You've got the 3 who needs to go to, try to get to the lead. You've got the 7 who's going to want to be near the lead. And then you've got the 10 who also needs the lead. So there should be a speed duel up front. So you want to have closers. So like you said, if you want to go more than a single here, I would take the second closer. I would take the 9. So I'm with you here. I'm with you, but then again, at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if, despite there being all this speed, one of those horses I just mentioned sets a 50-second half mile, and there's no horse within 2 lengths of the horse, and the horses can't be caught. That's one of. You don't have to go on Twitter long to see that complaint, but I certainly think it's a founded complaint. So, all right, is there any other horse you wanted to mention in this leg, or?
I will. I'll mention the 7 for anybody who's out there looking at the 7 as a play, and just tell you just a little bit why I kind of just threw him out. He said he has 72 morning line. He is Alston, who is a wonderful trainer, a lot like Grant Hurst. He doesn't put a horse in that he doesn't think can win. So he's always dangerous. But the one reason I dislike him, he did run an 88 high speed figure. Number 1 is against maidens. This is his first time against winners. That's an angle that I always look at, that really only talented horses can win next out against horses. You just don't know what they beat. But I don't like the time of Saratoga. He ran a mile in 1:37 and 3. I think horses like the 6 or the 9, running a mile, they'll be closer to 1:35. He'll have to really pick it up and step it up to be able to beat these horses. I don't like his running style. Although sometimes maidens who win on the lead, they don't run fast enough to be on the lead against winners. That the first time against winners, they might run a little bit different. So I don't know where he's going to be in the race. I think he has to run faster. And I'm getting such a coup for my money. I'd rather have somebody who I really think has a shot, has proven themselves against winners.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't want a horse that's going to be that needs to be on the lead in this race, and I'm not sure that is the case with the 7, but it might be. So that's enough to have me kind of step away from that horse. So, All right, that's certainly another interesting leg. I do listen. If the 6 runs the race he ran last time, he's going to win the race. So I don't. Sometimes I think you can overcomplicate things as well. So all right, cool. Let's move on to race 8, 6 furlong allowance optional claiming race. Again, it's a sprint. What do you think here? What's your take? Because I think I've got a long shot for us.
I wouldn't disagree. So in my pick 5 that I'm trying to put together today, this is the leg that I'm going to keep at State Red, which is often alarming to me because they just don't run fast enough. They don't run consistent enough. And so you see a lot of parity within the race. I'm probably going to end up putting like 7 or 8 in my pick. But of those, obviously, the 2 Fierce Lady, for Rudy Rodriguez, you can never throw Rudy Rodriguez out. He is the speed, he's shortening up, clearly a contender. The 6, as well, there's going to be the Hornets who is the morning line favorite. I thought those will be the favorite. Highest speed figures are generally the highest in the group. He's pretty consistent, or she's pretty consistent, being there at the wire. But I'm going to take a couple of chances in here with the 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11.
Right. Yep. I think you still have to go. You do. You just mentioned the horse that I'm going to actually take a shot with some win money on today, and that's the 7 horse, My Roxy Girl, Linda Rice trained. Mm-hmm. I think this horse has made a lot of money in her career. 5 years old, she's already made $500,000. She's faced some tough horses. She ran in the New York Stallion Stakes last November. Certainly didn't embarrass herself. She's beaten the 6 who you said you liked, which is Bertranda. So I think I got to keep an eye on the board. But if I can get 10 to 1 on this horse, I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to play the horse. So that's one horse I do like. And the other horse, you didn't mention. What do you think of the 3? Maybe you did mention, but maybe I didn't miss it. What do you think of the 3 horse, JC Shooting Star? Because this horse is 8 years old. It's made $700,000. Just in June, it was placed in a grade 3. Now listen, the horse obviously didn't belong there. The horse was 100 to 1, newspaper of record. But the horse has got some serious back class here. So is it just a case of, what this old mare ain't what she used to be, or what do you think with respect to this horse?
I do like that, Jose Ortiz retains the mount. I'm sure he could have moved if he really wanted to. He does have backlash, or I should say she has backlash, and has done well in this condition before. Even in this condition last time, she wasn't disgraced, beaten 2 3/4, and that's the problem with a lot of these horses, is they're not beaten. They all run on these levels before. They're all kind of there. Their buyers are all in the 70s, and really, literally any of these horses can win. And I agree. The three can win very nicely at a price, but also if you look at the 9 Playtone, who was a $150,000 purchase with receiver, 2 back in an optional 81. Now, he ran a 6, but she ran a 57. The buyers are just kind of weird and ridiculous. But she does come into this race. Short leader is pretty good. He's coming off a layoff with at least 3 bullets coming in, 48 and 3, 48, 2, 48 and 4. For a state bred, that's pretty doggone good. For a horse that was second in a state back in November, has a chance. So many of these have a shot, and so that's why I'm going as deep as I can possibly come.
Sure. And just to piggyback on what you just said about the 9. Look, the 9's only 3 years old, and like some of these other horses we've mentioned, George Weaver's not looking to get rid of this horse, or these folks that own the horse, they're not. It's not up for a claim, so they obviously still believe in this horse, which is nice to see. Mm-hmm. And look at those workouts in the morning. This horse is in shape. Right? Look at 1, 2, 3 bullets, and then the last workout, third of 18, 101 and 2 breathing. It's certainly nothing to snicker at. So I think you're right. I'm going to use this horse as Playtone. I overlooked this horse at first, but this is a definite shot play. That's for sure. Okay. Good. Thanks for pointing that out. I think that's helpful. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the next leg here. It's the feature race on the card. It's a $500,000 race. As I mentioned earlier, it's the counterpart to the race that happened yesterday in which Decorated Invader was finally defeated. And I'm going to say about this race what I said about the race yesterday. If they ran this race 5 times, I wouldn't be surprised if we had 5 different winners, because a lot of these horses on paper, they look very, very, very similar. They're all fast. They've all can put up a buyer in the 80s. So it just comes down to who's going to get the trip, and you never know that until the race unfolds, and you can try to figure it out. When I looked at it, I noticed there were a lot of closers, but I also thought that there were only a couple speeds. So the 2 show speed and the 3 show speed. The rest of them are just about stone cold closers. So I think the 2 and the 3 are going to get a serious benefit in this long race to kind of go out there and kind of do it themselves. I think the 2 and the 3 are going to be out there, and there's going to be some distance for the rest of the field. So I think when you think of the pace that way, I think you've got to give those 2 an edge. What do you think?
Yeah. In my ticket, I'm probably going to have at bare minimum 2, but I'm trying to do 3 just because I'm so deep in the previous race. And obviously, the 1 and the 2 are you can't turn your back on Christophe Clement right now. The man is red hot. And his last race in the Lake Placid at Saratoga, he likes the track, ran well. His fire speed figure 87 is right there with the Nola with an 88 and Appalachian at Keenan. So I think those 2 are the 2 you have to include. The question that you bring up is the 3, who I do think is going to be on the lead. If you go 2 back in the Wonder again, he was a length off the lead. I think he's going to get the lead by default. And for this question, since Johnny Palace has navigated in a slower pace to really have something for the end, I don't know.
With respect, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I didn't want to forget this point. With respect to the 1, what do you say to someone who says, well, if you like the 1, you got to like the 4 because they were only heads apart the last time they ran with one another, and it doesn't really matter who won because they finished right together. It matters too if you got the race, but once that's over and you move on, you kind of got to like both of them. What do you say to that?
I would agree as well that you do. From Mike Maker is dangerous at a price. The horse is beautifully bred. His fire speed figures are within range, 81, 83, and then jump up to an 86. He could clearly win, and Zero Other Speed is about as dangerous as you can get. You are getting 3.5 to 1, 7 to 2. And that's probably where he should be. I lean slightly towards Christophe. I lean to Shirk McGee. He has great turf trainers and endurance trainers for horses that are going beyond a mile and an 8.
That's a really good point. How about this? And then there's this notion that the 4 ran in December, January, February, March, May. So
I don't love that.
June, July. So this horse is under a long campaign without a layoff to speak of. So I think that's kind of a negative that you could make against the 4 as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree. The 1 and the 2 obviously are in there. If you can play a piece or if you wanted to play a piece, obviously you can go with 4. But I'm going to take a look at Philmont, who's with John Susan over there in Europe, who's kind of their top player. If you watch any Arc de la Triomphe, he'll have 2 or 3 in there. But he broke his maiden, won an allowance next out, and then was 3rd in a grade 3. And I just firmly believe that turf races in Europe dwarf what we have. They're just so much better. And this race,
that's sacrilege.
Particularly, this race isn't particularly tough compared to what they run. So I think he is a real threat in here. Coming over trying to steal a $500,000 purse and then come back to Europe. So I think that he is one to watch. It's harder to get a read because you don't have fires and things like that. But I'm looking to try to add him in as much as I can. And as a long shot, I like the 7. I don't care for Kathleen O'Connell at all. But anytime you have a trainer that comes from a smaller track that really, I mean, she could stay home at Monmouth and then try to win a stake there on the turf, which would be fine. But she's taking a shot at the big boys and the big purses. She tried last time in the light classes, just got beat a length and a half. And to your point, if you like the 1, you have to like the 4. How do you not like the 7? So by the way,
or the 5
for 9 on the board on turf,
or even
by real solution that I love.
Or even the 5. I mean, by the same logic, the 5 is only off by a length and a length and 3/4. But to your point, I like the 7 as well, and I think the value bet is the 7. So I'm most likely, believe it or not, going to make a win bet on the 7. Despite the fact, again, listen, despite the fact that I don't like the way the pace scenario is going to set up, it's going to set up in a way that's not favorable to a horse like this. I get it. However, a couple things. You just mentioned Kathleen O'Connell. Now, this is a classic horseplay thing, right? There can be the best. There could be. I know guys who wouldn't bet Jerry Bailey because whenever they bet Jerry Bailey, he would never win. However, when they bet against him, he would always defeat them. So you have that end of it, but then you have people with relationships like me and Kathleen O'Connell. I've always had luck when I've bet her horses. I'm sure I have a very positive ROI betting her horses at Monmouth, Gulfstream. So I've been lucky with her horses. So there's that, which is totally illogical and somewhat magical thinking. But put that aside, let's get back to reality. You look at the turf. The Tomlinson number is obviously good, but what I like even better is the turf distance number in the racing form. She has the highest. Her horse has the highest turf distance number in this race.
Oh yeah.
So the horse is obviously, at least if you go by the algorithm that determines this, is supposed to be able to get this distance the most easily. So, those 2 or 3 plus the factors you mentioned, if this horse is 15-1, or God, I hope even more, it's not a bad win bet. I mean, we see these horses win quite often. So I would use the 7 in my pick 5 ticket. I'm going to put some win money on it. So I would use the 7, and then I would use the 2 and the 3 because I like the way the pace is going to set up for them. Again, I think what you mentioned about the 6 is interesting. I've never had luck betting foreign horses coming to America, so despite the fact that it is widely believed that they have better turf racing than we do, and they do win a lot of the Breeders' Cup races, I've never had much luck betting them, so I'm going to take a pass there, and I'm going to, I'm going to go 2, 3, 7 in this leg. Those are my picks, but I will say this, I wouldn't be shocked if the 5 won the race, so, for the same reasons you had just mentioned, and the 5 hasn't had quite as long of a campaign as the 7 has, so the 5's got some things working for her as well. So again, it's a tough race.
That 5, the 5's my brethren, and I mean, one drop kit does get a little turf on the mare side, but I don't love the pedigree. The turf figure's only 239. But you did run well. I like 5. Can't discount that. She did well there.
He came running. He was threatening at the end, so. All right. Again, it's a very tough race. This is a tough sequence. Let's make no mistake about it. With the exception of that one race where race 7, where I like the 6, I think it's a very tough sequence. All right, let's move on to the get-out race, the last race on my card, where everyone who's down is trying to get even for the day, and that's always a dangerous proposition. They're going 6 furlongs on the dirt. Claimers. It's a condition claimer race, which means it's only for certain types of horses, and in this case, it's for horses who haven't won a race who have never won 2 races. By the way, and never won 2. So, what's your take here? Who do you like?
So, because I'm going so deep in leg 3, the way in which I'm structuring the ticket is kind of to get to the real pace. And then maybe the ticket isn't huge, and I can hedge you a little bit on a couple other horses. When you do that, that definitely helps put the single or just goes 2 on 2 long shots because it's hard to hedge when you have 9 to 5.
Sure. And that happened to me last week with the Empire Pick 6. My partner and I, we got to the last leg, and we had some humongous payouts. We had 3 horses, and there were 8 horses in the race. I was able to hedge and make some win bets on some of the longer shots that I thought could threaten me in the race. And unfortunately, one of those hedges worked. So while I felt a lot of pain of not making the big score, my bankroll was intact for the day. It was actually bigger than when I started. So I didn't feel better, but my bankroll was better. So it's not a bad strategy that you're talking about here. So it's a very good point.
Yes, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of a risk, and I'm going to go with 2 horses in here. So I think when the wire comes, if I'm alive and the world pays, I have a shot at it. And the first horse is the 3 Southern Bridge for Bill Mott. Again, this is a horse that is a speed horse who's cutting back in distance and dropping. Came into the last race, off the layoff. Mind you, it was turf, but the horse hasn't run bad on dirt either, so the surface whip isn't a problem. But I do like that he's dropping back in distance, the 6 furlongs and sprinting, and he came into that race with several bullets, had a good race, went to 77, has a make of 3 in between, should move forward conditioning, so he should be better. So I'm definitely going to have him on top. And the 7 Dangerous Edge. Now, this horse is very interesting. I hope you looked at him, because if you own this horse, which now you could own him if you have $40,000 you want to distribute. But his first
I've got it in stock drawer here.
Because look at this. I mean, you were talking about bad racing luck, not just strip wise, because you can add that as well. But his first race, he only gets beat 29 lengths to Tisdale Law. Then he gets beat 3.5 to Captain Bombastic. He's a stakes winner. Bourbon Bay, he was in an allowance yesterday, who actually was second in the Jerome at Aqueduct. He beat them in the 4th race of his. I mean, just bad. Like, he's not going against a terrible field when he was with George Beaver. But they finally say, you know what, he's not that good after losing to them. They drop him in for a tag for 25,000. He's in GP. And John claimed him out of that race. His 3 races after that, which are all on par here, weren't terrible. And he has ascending bias. Well, somewhat, anyway. He won to the 62. First time against winners, like I say, it's very difficult. He kind of drops down with a 55. Gets beaten 8.5. But his second time coming back at Saratoga, he runs at 74. That 74 is within range here. He's obviously 92. And I think he has a shot here because it seems to be, with the 2 and the 3, a decent amount of speed in here. So if my 3 starts to die, my hope is that the 7 with Gerard Ortiz is going to come save me. Mind you, I'm just hoping that I'm there.
Well, certainly the 7 is definitely a must-use on a multi-race bet. Absolutely. All the reasons you said, I couldn't agree more. However, my pick in the race, you didn't mention, and you just mentioned speed, but I think is the speed of the speed here is the 6, Ink Spots. I'll just lay it right out there. I'm a big fan of Orlando Nada. I think he represents the type of young blood, the energy, and the charisma that we need in this sport to keep it going. But that aside, this guy knows what he's doing. I mean, he sent out 15 horses, and 6 of them have won, which is amazing, an amazing percentage. But I think that this horse has the capability to go right to the front, take the fight to them. All right, they put him on the turf last time out. He was obviously in over his head. But, experienced handicappers know that that's often a training move to, quote, get speed out of a horse. So I think I think he was using that as somewhat of a workout to get to this spot. So I have a feeling that this horse is gonna go to the front, and they, to quote a guy from Rhode Island who passed on about 15 years ago, but he used to say they gotta go catch him. So I think with the 6, they gotta go catch him. I think this horse is gonna go right out, and I think this horse is gonna have a shot to take them pole to pole. So that's my top pick. I'll probably put some win money on the horse. Another horse I'm looking at here that you didn't mention is the 1, Liam's Fire. I think that horse is going to be in the mix. He's got there's something happened. 2 starts out, comes back last time, runs a decent race with a trouble line, bobbles at the beginning. Small amount of improvement out of this horse will get this horse to the winner's circle. I know it's out of a trainer who is new. She hasn't been at this much, but again, young and trying to make a name for herself, similar to Nada. So I think this is a horse I can see winning this race. And let's face it, after what we saw on the last race yesterday, that shows us that anything can happen in these sorts of races. So I'm going to use the 1. Like you said, I'm going to use the 3. Your 7 and the 6. Those will be my 4 horses. I use them in the last leg of the sequence. But I'm going to put separate ticket, little win money on the 6 there.
No, that's good. To your point with the 6, I would point out that when he broke his maiden at Belmont in June, on the Friday, when he showed that speed, he opened the first quarter in 21-4 and was able to hold on. 21-4 in a sprint is pretty doggone fast. It really could have been 22 and change. And the fact that he could hold on is actually impressive.
It is, but let's face it, they finished in 112 and almost 113, which is very slow for those.
Yeah, you really need to be with this for probably 109, 110 at the slowest. But you never know when they don't have to run that fast. You would hear from the rest of the group. You don't know how he was running himself, if he was steering down or just
And he beat the 2, which is going to take a lot of money here. So that's something to keep in mind.
True that.
Yep. All right, so we've got the card wrapped up. Do you agree with my sentiment that it's an unusually difficult sequence or more difficult than usual? What would you think? How would you classify this sequence?
I would say it's on par. It's on par. If that round horseman perspective at a really short price, then clearly this pick 5 can be had by anyone. If he doesn't, because he's probably the most likely single. If you're gonna single. And so beating him, I think the payout for the pick 5 could go astronomical depending on whoever wins that race. It's just because I think you're going to get the price in the 3rd leg. And you can really go with anybody in the stake race.
Oh, stake race is brutally tough.
Absolutely, and it's hard to go deep in a 6-horse field when it's a multi-race, 5-race wager. And you also have that big field in the optional claiming 40 where it's all stake bred. I mean, you really have to design your ticket to be deep when you are at most risk for losing. And so I think that is that stake bred optional claiming. And really you have to, if you really want to pay, you got to beat Chad Brown because everybody's going to have him. And he could be 3 to 5.
So here's how I look at it. The more difficult I think it is, the less money I want to risk on these things. And you would think that that's obvious, but in truth, in actuality, most horse players do the opposite. The harder it is, the more they do, the more horses they include. Mm-hmm. I think that's foolish. So I'm going to single the 6 in race 7, and I'm not going to go very deep in race 9. I'm only going to use probably 2 horses in race 9. I'm probably going to use the 7 and the 3. So I'll only have 2 horses going for me in the big feature, and obviously I'll be hoping like heck, because one of them's morning line 6-1, and one of them is morning line 10-1. So if either of those, if I'm alive, I'm going to be in for some value heading into the last race. So it's a long-winded way of saying I'm going to keep my ticket cheap, so I don't have to risk too much money because I'm not overly confident today. An interesting thing. Sorry, go ahead. All I was going to say was it seems like the more horses, at least from my experience, the more money I spend on a multi-race wager, the more money I want to spend. Because I say, well, I'm 4 deep here, and I'm 3 deep, and I'm 5 deep. Well, since I'm 5 deep, oh, God, this horse could probably win. Then I throw another horse. You know what I'm trying to say? And then I say, well, in the other leg, I need more protection because I've got such a huge investment here. So these things can really get away from you.
No, I agree 100%. In the group that we did with Alabama yesterday, the first leg was an allowance race, which really was a great betting race with a lot of horses. And we damn near did it all. We had like 9 of 10, something like that. And no ready, the favorite win. So when that happens, as a famous saying that we're on the wrong side of the bet, because when you use up all your horse capital in a race that you get 5-2, either it's not going to pay or you don't have the horses you need later. So really knowing, kind of guessing where that price is going to be is really, really, really important. So if you can get through with your two horses in that one race and you get a price, you are on the right side of the bet, right?
Exactly. So in that race you're talking about where you had 9 horses and the favorite won, you didn't lose, but it feels a lot like losing. You wince as they cross the line. You have that wince the same way you would as if you lost. So yeah, it's
especially because it was ahead.
yeah, that too. And I'll tell you, it's not for the multi-race wagers are not for the faint of heart. I think that's a pretty safe statement.
Yep.
All right, my friend, some excellent analysis. I appreciate your help as we move forward. I hope we've been helpful to anyone who will listen to this podcast today. You can catch us every Sunday in the morning, relevant horse racing podcast. So, all right, Mike, good luck to you today, buddy.
You too, buddy.
All right. Yeah, talk to you soon.
Bye.